Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is John Viglotti. On behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for today's battery and precious metals company presentations. Our first live presentation today comes from Vision Lithium. And before I introduce our speaker, a few points to note. Please submit your questions in the question box to the left of the slides. And if you're interested in scheduling a meeting with Vision Lithium, please click on the Meetings tab found on the left navigation bar. You'll be able to view the company's availability and submit a meeting request. On a final note, all of today's presentations will be recorded and available for 24/7 replay. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Yves Rougerie. He's the President and Chief Executive Officer of Vision Lithium, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol ABEPF and on the TSX under the symbol VLI. Welcome, Yves.
Thank you very much, John. Pleased to be here and to be the first presenter this morning. Vision Lithium, of course, a small exploration company based in Val d'Or, Quebec, up in what is becoming a major lithium hub for development for the future in North America. If we go through the quick slides, the forward-looking statement, which is an obligatory effort, and the qualified person and third-party data release, where I am the qualified person, and if we move on, we get to the board of directors and management. I'm, of course, the president CEO, a longtime geologist, a lot of experience in the Abitibi and many different metals. Our executive chairman of the board is Victor Cantori, who's very well known right now in the market as the president and CEO of AMEX Exploration, and also involved in many other companies, and was long involved with Nemaska Lithium in the development of the Nemaska Wabushi mine for years. Other members of the board and management are Nancy Lacourcière, our CFO, and Mr. Robert Bryce, who was the original founder of the company, a longtime mine builder in this area, very famous. Scott Jobin-Bevins, a past president of the PDAC, a PhD geologist, very well known with a well-known consulting firm, Carrickle Creek International Consulting, and Jonathan Gagne, a senior engineer, mining engineer, who was the country manager for Sayona in their early stage development here in Quebec with the OTA deposit. The capital structure of the company, we have 240 million shares outstanding, and fully diluted would be just over 310 million, market cap at about 35 million right now. And these are the properties that we have in Eastern Canada. That we have a bunch of base metal properties yes. And so here we're looking at the three major lithium properties that we have and that we own 100%. The Goslith property in Manitoba, the CADILLAC lithium property near Val d'Or in Quebec, as well as the SIRMAC lithium property up in the lithium belt of the James Bay region of Quebec. So we've zoomed in here to the James Bay area. This basically covers what that area is. It's very large. And as you can see, there's like 3 bands of lithium deposits. So at the top end there is the new zone that everybody is involved in, the Corvette property of Patriot Battery Metals and Winsome and many other companies that are staking ground along strike from that very impressive discovery. Below that is the big zone. So that's where there's 3 deposits, large deposits being actively developed for mining, which are the Galaxy Resources by Alchem, the Critical Elements Rose deposit, and Nemaska Lithium's Wabushi deposit. Those are all 30 plus million ton deposits at close to 1.5% in total, and moving quickly towards production within a year or two. And below that, another almost 200 kilometers south, on its way down towards Chibougamau, you have this the Frotette-Evans Greenstone Belt, where there are 2 known deposits: the Moblan deposit that Sayona acquired last year, and to the west of them, about 40 kilometers away in the same belt, the SIRMAC deposit that belongs to us. Next slide, please. When we zoom in here On the SIRMAC and Mobland deposits, I'm just trying to show you here the road accesses. So we basically, at the bottom of the slide is the highway, the regional highway that joins Chibougamau either down to the Lake St. John area where there's a deep sea port, or else to the west down towards Val d'Or and all the availability of mining and metallurgy down there. And so the road system is very good. All these roads that we're looking at can carry 100-ton trucks. So that transportation of ore and other materials is very efficient, cost efficient, and quick. So the thing we want to talk about today relative to the SIRMAC project, we'll look at the project in more detail with some slides after, but we want to discuss what we're doing right now with the project, which is this direct shipping ore bulk sample project. So as we all know, of course, the demand for lithium outstrips the supply dramatically this year. The lithium carbonate and lithium concentrates are at historic highs. And therefore, producers are looking for added supply where they can't get it. And basically, they've turned to buying direct shipping ore from anywhere they can get it. So direct shipping ore is essentially just rock that is shipped without being beneficiated. So it's not concentrated, it's not upgraded in any way. You're just selling the rock, just like a quarry or a gravel pit, really. And the stuff has been going for prices as high as $950 US. There's an example here of Core Lithium in Australia that sold a 15,000-ton sample for that price just a few months ago from Australia to China. So in our case, middle of 2022, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we start getting third-party calls about interest in our SIRMAC project and the potential for direct shipping ore. And so we looked at it and said, well, if DSO is a real thing, we have the right deposit for it because it's got all the advantages that many other projects don't have. And so we did start a PEA to be able to support the contention that it's an economic project, so PEA being a preliminary economic assessment. And we also initiated permitting in September, I believe it was. And so both are ongoing at this point. The PEA, we were hoping we would have out so that we could talk about it today, but it's not quite finished, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So it should be out within a week, we're hoping, with a public release. And the permitting is ongoing. We feel very comfortable and positive about the permitting from all the reports we've gotten from the people involved in it. We believe it should not be an issue or a big issue from an environmental standpoint, and that the likelihood that we get a permit for a 50,000-ton bulk sample is very high, and that we should get it by the spring of this year, which would allow us after that to plan and put into action an extraction program for a 50,000-ton bulk sample. We don't have the PEA out, so I don't want to use any numbers from it or anything like that. But just looking at the price that Core Lithium was able to sell this material for, and the 50,000-ton bulk sample, you can pretty easily see what the value of something like that is. And the costs are actually very, very low because it's like a quarry. So you're looking at very low mining costs, and the highest part of the cost is going to be in the transportation. So we're advancing that at this time. We're in advanced discussions with several third parties that are interested in the offtake of this material. And so everybody's kind of waiting around for the permitting to move forward so that we can get serious about negotiating a contract. So there again, we feel pretty comfortable based on these discussions that we'll have an offtake agreement in order to be able to extract the sample this summer and get pretty significant revenue from that over the course of the year. So the 50,000 bulk sample is part of a historical resource on that deposit, which is about 300,000 tons of 1.4. That, if I generalize, this is a historical estimate. In the PEA, we have a renewed we redo the resource, and that'll be out again next week. And the 300,000 tons, if we take 50,000 tons off, that'll leave us with 250,000 tons of mineable material in our view. And we will be advancing the project towards mining that. So that's going to require a different permit, which is going to take a little bit of time. And that's where the advantage of this bulk sample permit is that it allows us to get 50,000 tons out early and then work towards the full mining permit, which would then allow us to mine the rest of it over the course of 3 or 4 years at the most. So here we go with some of the slides on the project and the location and everything else. So again, this road on the right hand side of the screen going right through the middle, that's what they call the northern route. So that joins Chibougamau all the way up with the Nemaska and other major lithium deposits on the James Bay Road. And that's a dirt road, but it's highly maintained, and you can run 150-ton trucks on that thing. And to the west, there's a road that joins to our property, and that also can carry 150-ton trucks, so that we can move rock here. DSO, and that's the particular thing here with DSO. The biggest cost is transportation, and we can move it on 100 or 200, 150-ton trucks versus using highways where we can only run 30-ton trucks. So there's a certain advantage to having that. You can also see here there's a couple of forestry camps. This Camp Chantillon to the right and Camp Broadback to the west, and those are areas where we can. There's room for 100 men or more at those locations, so we can set up our people only 20 kilometers away from the deposit and the requirement to mine there on a seasonal basis. This is a shot of that Broadback camp where we're only 20 kilometers from the deposit, and therefore excellent lodging conditions for the people that would work on the project. This is an image of the property itself. So we have about 100 square kilometers on this property, and within it, at this point, there are two main areas of lithium mineralization. To the far west is the number 5 zone. That's the historic zone. That's the one that we're looking at to do the DSO program on. And further to the east, 5 kilometers away, we have this thing called the east zone, which is a small it's a zone. It's not well defined yet, but it's got several dikes that are relatively narrow, but that give good grades well above 1%. And so that's of great interest for us in the future. This is a zoom into the number 5 dike, which again is the main target here for this DSO program. You can see the road that comes right up basically to the dike, and that's connected to the main forestry road system and the main other road systems. So we don't have any costs in terms of road construction or anything like that. To the right of that, you can see a number of dikes, and these are all sizable dikes, maybe not the same size as big as the number 5, but pretty close in many cases, and they've barely been touched. And we see a lot of potential in those dikes for the discovery of much further resources on this property. A couple of pictures just showing the zone. So here we can see the zone, how it's been deforested and cleaned out and cleaned off, and how high it is relative to the surrounding area. It's another picture, again, they're geologists there for scale, and again, how they've already prepared the terrain for us to do this work. This is the last one I'll show you of that. And so again, here we want to do a bulk sample. We don't have to strip. We don't have to cut any wood. We don't have to do any prep. We can go in. There's no waste. So the strip ratio is 1-to-1. It's not even 1-to-1, sorry, it's 0. And we'll just take out the 50,000 tons without any waste production whatsoever. So again, that simplifies the permitting process quite significantly. So here's a picture of to the west. On the left is what the number 5 dike looked like 15 years ago, and on the right is Nemaska doing the work of deforesting and stripping the main dike in 2012. An aerial shot of what was cleaned out back in 2012, and the lines are 25 meters apart. These are all channel samples, and every red dot is above 1%. So out of these 7 lines of channel samples, 4 of them ran above 1.4%, or 5 of them, sorry, ran over 1.5%. And that's where a lot of the value of this zone comes from in an early stage bulk sample program, because it's going to be a higher grade and easily extracted without any costs. Here, again, that same picture, and we can see the drill holes that we did essentially back in 2018 when we acquired the property, basically looking to repeat the results of the Nemaska drilling prior to us. And of course we did. pretty much do that with values like 19.8 meters of 1.6, and all the way down you get to 22.4 meters of 1.7. So the grade is there, and as you can see, the thickness of the thing is about 20 meters or so, and 20 to 30 meters, and that's what this zone is. It's a large zone on surface, square footage, and then in depth it's only about 20 to 25 meters. So after this east dike that I talked about earlier in this section, the east zone is 5 kilometers from the main dike, and you can see here the work that we were doing at the time 2 years ago, and where we were stripping and trenching into this zone. And this is an example of the channel sample results that we got from this east zone. So this we've barely touched. We barely scratched the surface with this zone, and obviously, you can see, the potential for developing something significant is quite good there. So we're going to jump over to Manitoba, and so that property is in the north part of the province. And we put this slide up here. You can see we're about 230 kilometers on a winter road from the main road system of northern Manitoba. So our project there is called the Godslith Project. It's on the shores of God's Lake. And this slide is just to show that there's a whole bunch of First Nation communities in that area, which are going to eventually be a bonus in terms of developing the infrastructure for that reason, to develop this deposit, but also to develop their communities. Here's a close-up. So we're on the edge of the lake. The village is down to the right-hand side. They have an airstrip there. They have a winter road there. They have a power line that comes in. So all the infrastructure required for an isolated project is already there. And the deposit itself is up to the northwest, about 5 kilometers from the village, as you can see there with that little green line. So the deposit was found and drilled by Inco about 60 years ago, and they drilled this thing off for over about 2 kilometers in strike length. And some of the intersections you can see on the far right was 1.59, 1.49, 1.79% at 9 to 15 meters true width. And so it's very impressive. So that little gray line cut across is a section, and we're going to look at that on the next slide. So this is the only section that had a hole down to 800 feet, which is at that bottom hole. As you can see, these are all true widths. So these are not the lengths drilled, but the true widths. And they're all in the 10 to 15 meter true width at a 1.5%. So it's a very significant deposit. And we're really happy we have that one in our portfolio. This is the longitudinal, so we're looking at all the intersections. And as you can see here, almost all the holes are above 400 feet. And there's only a couple of holes below that. And from that, so back in 1986, Hood Geological Consulting took the old Inco data, and they produced a resource, which is historical now. There is no core left or anything. That all has to be redone. But they did a resource. They came up with 9.6 million tons, short tons. So that's about 9 million tons of 1.25%. That's diluted, and at a weighted average true width of over 11 meters. So this is over 1.5 kilometers, so 1 mile long, and mineralized down to about 800 feet. So we believe that based on this deepest hole, which is actually the best hole of all those drilled, we think that clearly the likelihood is that this deposit continues to at least 1,000 feet, and therefore the tonnage could be 50%, maybe even 100% greater than what it is now. So we are close to 10 million tons, and we think we'll confirm that when we get in there drill, and we can probably go to 15 just by going down to 800 feet, and we may be able to go to 20. We go down to 1,000 or 1,200 feet. So we're very excited about this project. We're negotiating with the local First Nation to sign an exploration agreement, and we should get there this year and hopefully be in there drilling by late summer or else in the winter coming up. Last project we'll look at here is the CADILLAC lithium project that we acquired a year ago, just a little bit more than a year ago. It covers 200 square kilometers almost, and it's situated right smack in the middle of the Abitibi gold belt. So it's right below the CADILLAC break, right below Rouyn-Noranda is on the left-hand side, Val-d'Or is on the right-hand side with those big stars, and Malartic and La Ronde or the Agnico Eagle's large mines are the other ones on that. You can see the Sayona NAL operations on the top side of the map, and we're down at the bottom here. So we're in new territory, and we acquired this 200 square kilometers around a known occurrence that had never been worked, basically. Only had a couple of samples done on it, no drilling or whatsoever. After we acquired this property, people staked thousands and thousands and thousands of claims covering ground that hadn't been staked maybe forever, 50 kilometers in both directions and then further to the south. This is all based on this little dike here. Basically, it's called the B dike, and we picked it up based on that. And on the right hand side is a picture of a large spodumene crystal, and the card is 4 inches wide, so it gives you an idea how big this crystal is. And there are several like that along strike on the outcrop all the way along, and the outcrop is about 1,000 feet long, 300 meters. So when we acquired it, it was just before the snows came down last year. So we took a bunch of samples, sod samples across, thinking, are these, is this spodumene? We didn't know, nobody had sampled it. And lo and behold, all of these samples came back with pretty significant assays. And so that was very encouraging. So we followed that up with some LiDAR work, and we actually determined that there's probably 8 dikes, maybe more, hidden in the tree line there. And we drilled on 3 of these dikes, and we came up with results similar to the ones on the right-hand side here. So we're getting good numbers, but we're getting them over relatively narrow lengths in the areas we drilled. But this is a first-year project. It's a greenfields project, and we have a lot more work to do to define how the mineralization actually runs within those dikes, how many other dikes there are. Are there any bigger dikes? The dikes are typically about 5 to 10 meters right now, and this is an ongoing project that has a lot of upside. So here's a picture, an image of the property itself, the 200 square kilometers. The drilling that we just looked at is in that little square box in the top. And so we did a lot of groundwork in the summer, took a lot of samples. And at this point in the interpretation, we think that there's at least 2 major zones where the geochemical and geological information suggests that we have potential to discover other spodumene dikes. And so those are areas for follow-up this year, or whenever the budget is in place to do this work. And we have more work to be done on the property in terms of groundwork to look at a lot of dikes. There's a lot of dikes in that area, so a lot of work has got to be done. So we're pretty happy with that first year. I mean, the results are quite good, and the upside to the property is quite high. And the greatest advantage of that property, of course, is that it is right next to all of the infrastructure, so it's very cost effective to work there. So just to conclude, the SIRMAC project is all hands on deck to get this DSO bulk sample going, because with the price of lithium, we don't know if it's going to be as high next year. Could be higher, could be lower. So we want to get this bulk sample out as soon and as quickly as we can, because the potential revenue for us, net revenue, is extremely high. And then we're going to work towards advancing a mining permit, a mining lease, so that we can take advantage, if the prices are still good, in a year or 2 or 3, and mine out that property. It's got all the advantages that many others don't have, and so we want to use that to our advantage in the short term. CADILLAC project, as I just said before, we're going to continue working on that and advancing it. And Godslith, as soon as we have a negotiated exploration agreement with the First Nation, we're going to work to get in there to start drilling with 1 or 2 drills and to repeat the historic resource and increase it and expand it to as much as we can. And that's all I've got to say. And I guess we'll go to the questions as quickly as possible, because I've spoken too much. I think I've had a few questions, of course, about the permitting. And so I think I answered that. Basically, it's ongoing. We feel very comfortable. Everybody who's involved, who is an expert in the field and knowledgeable, has indicated that they think it's a pretty simple project. It's not invasive, and therefore it should go along pretty well. Let me see. I look at another question here. A good presentation. Is the mineralogy of the SIRMAC zone good in terms of not containing deleterious elements? Okay, so I can answer that. Nemaska did some metallurgical work back in 2012. We did a whole bunch back in 2018-19, and the material is very high quality. So we were able to get almost 90% recovery through flotation. So DMS and flotation, which is very high, and we had no trouble making 6% concentrate with DMS or heavy liquid separation or flotation. So there is very little iron. We had one sample that had high iron in it, but it was only because it was the lowest grade sample that we took for the test, and it ended up being contaminated by the surrounding rocks. But otherwise, the high grade samples and the average sample within the dike itself had very little iron, less than 0.5%, that's for sure. Thank you for that question. And there's another one. What would the transportation cost to a port on the St. Lawrence or the Saguenay be? Well, that's a question that will be answered in the PEA. So I don't know if I want to get ahead of myself. We of course have based a lot of the work we've done on other people's work, and so the Lac Rose feasibility study from last year indicated a cost of about, I think it's $150 to port and loaded in Montreal. So we're a lot closer to port than them. So we would imagine that we would be less than that. Another question is, are the First Nations in the area of God's Lake amenable to mining pegmatites? Again, we're discussing that. We were very close with them over the course of the last couple of years. The pandemic has thrown a big wrench in everything we've tried to do up in the north, and we're trying to right the ship and move it forward this year in particular. Another question is, where would the ore be processed and converted? Well, that's on the basis of whoever gets the offtake agreement. And so I can't say at this point, I don't want to say who we've been discussing this with. It wouldn't be fair to them. But there's only one concentrate producer in North America right now, and that's the Sayona guys in near Val-d'Or. And then the offtake agreements would take the ore offshore. So we're looking at we have interest from offshore as well as onshore. So we're looking at different choices, and obviously we'll pick the one that's the most favorable for us. Another question: any plans to build a conversion plant? Well, not in the immediate. I mean, I think the bulk sample advantage is to do it right now and make a lot of money off that if possible. But in the future, for whatever's left, it's a thought. We have to look at the economics of something like that. So thank you very much. Much appreciated to be here.